This might come as a surprise. The ancient Greeks and Romans were closely linked to ancient India. In science, trade, art, religion, and beyond. Sadly, this history is often neglected. Most people already know about Alexander's invasion in the 4th century BCE, but that invasion is just the introductory chapter to a long and complex history connecting the Greco-Roman world with India. Here's 8 fascinating things you might not know about the relationship between ancient Greeks, Romans, and Indians. Let's jump right in. Number 1. Buddhism among the Greeks. Buddhism spread rapidly starting with the reign of Ashoka Maurya. Buddhist missionaries were sent far and wide to proselytize the faith, including the Greek kingdoms that had sprung up in the wake of Alexander's conquest. This was very effective. Eventually, many Greeks living beyond the Mediterranean converted to Buddhism. In fact, archaeologists have discovered ancient Buddhist texts in India and Afghanistan, written in cursive Greek. They've also found numerous Buddhist stupas with Greek inscriptions. But what spurred this conversion to Buddhism? We know that Ashoka sent a Greek Buddhist monk, a man named Dharmarakshita, to proselytize the Buddhist faith among Greek communities living in what is today known as Gujarat and Sindh. Dharmarakshita alone converted as many as 37,000 Greeks over to Buddhism. Still, it wasn't until a century later, with the conversion of the Indo-Greek king Menander I, that the bulk of Greeks in the subcontinent accepted Buddhism. Menander was no ordinary man. He was an expansionary leader who conquered much of northwest India, and was so successful that the famed writer Strabo once said, "Menander conquered more tribes than Alexander the Great." Though relatively short-lived, Menander's Indo-Greek kingdom, centered in what is today known as Punjab, was wealthy and powerful. One indication of this prosperity is that its coinage has been found in lands as distant as Britain. Simply put, Menander's influence cannot be understated. The Milinda Panha text records his conversations with the Buddhist sage Nagasena. "May the venerable Nagasena accept me as a supporter of the faith, as a true convert from today onwards, as long as my life shall last." Menander's personal conversion is a critical event in Greco-Buddhism. With his patronage, most Indo-Greeks converted to Buddhism. This Greco-Buddhist lineage would continue even after the collapse of Menander's Indo-Greek kingdom. Greek successor states in India, such as the Kushan Empire and the Western Kshatrapas, would remain passionate proponents of both the Buddhist faith and Greek culture for hundreds and hundreds of years. Number 2. Greco-Roman art in India. The rise of the Greeks in South Asia led to the development of unique, syncretic art known as the Gandharan style. The Gandharan school of art blended both Hellenistic and native Indian elements. Greek figures were often portrayed alongside or integrated with Indianized elements. For example, sculptures of the Greek titan Atlas would be placed underneath Buddhist temples, signaling that Atlas was holding up the structure. Similarly, Gandharan craftsmen made carvings at the Sanchi monastery that placed Indianized lotus flowers within traditional Greek patterns. But the Gandharan influence wasn't limited to stone sculpture. Indo-Greek coinage mixed the Greek portraiture style with Indianized elements too. This portraiture style was rapidly adopted by native Indian kings. Under the Indo-Greeks, Buddhist art thrived. It is widely believed that the first iconic representations of the Buddha were created in the Gandharan style. Prior to the development of this style, Buddhists avoided representing the Buddha in their art. They were aniconic. Some historians believe that the development of this more relatable, iconic style helped to popularize Buddhism in India. Greek mythological stories also found new life in India. Hercules, Dionysus, and other legendary Greek personages were given Indian travel stories to indicate that they were culturally and spiritually connected to the subcontinent. Regional differences abound. It's worth noting that while the Indo-Greek kingdoms influenced religion and art in North India, in South India, the tastes of the Roman Empire may have been more influential. In Amaravati, located in what is today known as Andhra Pradesh, the Buddhist stupa details the Hindu goddess Ganga in a way that is immediately reminiscent of the Roman goddess Fides. Nearby at Nagarjunakunda, a wall carving depicts a battle scene heavily inspired by Trajan's column at the Arch of Constantine in Rome. The area also features a Roman-style amphitheater, the only remaining one of its kind in India. These elements could have been integrated into local forms by Indian craftsmen inspired by the influx of Roman coinage and sculpture, or by Roman craftsmen who lived in South India. Number 3. Roman trade with India. The Mediterranean trade with India existed since early antiquity through both maritime and overland routes into the subcontinent. The volume of this trade increased significantly with the establishment of Roman Egypt and with the discovery, by Roman and Greek merchant sailors, of how to use seasonal monsoon winds to carry ships across the Arabian Sea in a straight course. This made a considerable difference to shipping and navigation. Alongside this development, the establishment of Roman Egypt minimized the cost of trading over the Arabian Sea by eliminating bureaucratic middlemen, brought India and Rome into direct contact, and led to political stability. Evidence of the trade abounds, from historical accounts describing the trade to shipwrecked Roman merchant vessels, to discoveries of Roman coinage and goods in India. According to Strabo, in a given year, as many as 120 ships sailed from the port of Myos Hormos to the coast of India. And that's just one of many ports. The trade was so extensive, in fact, that Pliny the Elder, a Roman statesman, complained that Rome's gold coinage was depleting due to the trade. Over 100 million sestertii left circulation every year in service of the trade for Indian luxury goods. In an era with just a few 100 million people living worldwide, this represents an enormous volume of exchange. Many ports in India received Roman goods, though aside from Karachi and Bharuch, it appears that the bulk of the trade was conducted at ports located in South India. In places like Arikamidu, Kavaripatnam, and Muziris, archaeologists have found hoards of coins, shards of Roman amphorae, and many other indications of trade. It is theorized that the Indo-Roman trade was so substantial that it contributed to the development of Golden Age Tamil kingdoms of the Sangam era. In Tamil Sangam literature, we even find references to Indo-Roman trade. The beautifully built ships of the Yavanas came with gold and returned with pepper, and Muziris resounded with the noise of ships arriving. The trade was sufficiently large to justify sending embassies from India to Rome, and vice versa. We know that a Roman embassy was established at Muziris for the benefit of the trade there. Meanwhile, according to the Roman emperor himself, Augustus Caesar, embassies were often sent to me from the kings of India. What goods were exchanged? The Romans exported clothing, ointments, gems, frankincense, glasswork items, lamps, silver and gold, wine, and slaves, while Indian merchants exported spices, cinnamon, peppers, ivory, gems, pearls, exotic animals, fine cloth, silks, and other textile items. Clearly, the Indo-Roman trade was varied, but many goods traded in India actually originated from China and Southeast Asia. In fact, most Chinese silk purchased by Romans was done in Indian markets. As with any trade, even rarer items would sometimes find their way from end to end, such as sculptural art for wealthy buyers. For example, archaeologists have discovered in the ruins of the Roman city of Pompeii what is referred to as the Pompeii Lakshmi. The Pompeii Lakshmi is an ivory statue of the Hindu goddess produced in Telugu, South India, and shipped off to a buyer in the Roman Empire. Number 4. Roman communities in India. The interactions between Rome and India were not distant transactional events. The historical record indicates that there were communities of Roman citizens living and working in cities throughout the subcontinent. Romans in India primarily worked as merchants and craftsmen. The Periplus Maris Erythrae, a Greek navigational book written in the 1st century CE, lists a series of ports along the Indian coast, including but not limited to Bharuch, Muziris, and Arikamidu. An excavation at Arikamidu, near present-day Pondicherry, has revealed a Roman trading settlement of this period, and elsewhere too the presence of Roman trade goods point to a continuous occupation. Hoards of Roman coins and shards of Roman wine amphora have also been found in Muziris, located near present-day Cochin. Muziris was an important port for Roman trade. In fact, even a temple to Augustus Caesar was built in the city, most likely to service the Roman community that had formed around their imperial embassy. There are indications of a Roman presence in other parts of South India too, both coastal and non-coastal, especially where river trade allowed Roman goods and culture to penetrate further inland. From ancient Tamil literature, we're told that there were many Roman merchants trading in the Kaveri Delta, and that they were a very prosperous community. Number 5. Indian visitors in the Greco-Roman world. We know that ancient Indians lived and traveled in the Greco-Roman world. This Indian presence is well recorded. For example, Indian gravestones have been found in Alexandria dating back to the Ptolemaic period, and graffiti motifs on pottery found at ports in the Red Sea reflect the presence of Indian merchants. All this is indicative of significant and regular communities of Indians in the Greco-Roman world. As far back as the life of Socrates, there were Indians either living in or visiting Athens. For example, the historical record reveals that Socrates was involved in conversations with an Indian who was skeptical of his philosophical approach. Also in Athens, a traveling Hindu ascetic from Gujarat, Zarmanochegas, burned himself alive as a demonstration of his faith. This event caused a sensation in Greek society and was a point of discussion for Greek writers. The legendary Roman orator Dio Chrysostom once claimed that Homer's poetry was popular in India, and that Indians were regular members of his audience. It's possible that interest in Greco-Roman art and philosophy attracted traveling scholars from the subcontinent. So, Indians were a normal sight in the Greco-Roman world. They were not only members of the mercantile and diplomatic class, but also missionaries and elite scholars. The historical record seems to support this notion. For example, some historians believe that Ammonius Saccas, a Roman citizen and leading Neoplatonist in Alexandria, was of Indian ethnic origin and may have hailed from what is today known as Bihar. Worth noting, historians believe that Ammonius's Indian origin may explain both the passion for India and Indian philosophy expressed by his student Plotinus, as well as the philosophical similarities between Vedanta Hinduism and Neoplatonism. In fact, it can be argued that Neoplatonism, the foundation for Christian mysticism in the Western world, was significantly influenced by Hinduism. After Ammonius's death, Plotinus even went on a journey to the east for Indian and Persian knowledge. But the Indian presence was hardly limited to intellectual and commercial pursuits. We know that some Indians were slaves in the Greco-Roman world. Records in Rome and Alexandria indicate that a wide variety of persons, from philosophers to merchants, owned Indian slaves. Number 6. Greco-Roman women as slaves in India. Greek slave women first appear in Indian texts in the 5th century BCE. In antiquity, there was an extensive slave trade between the Mediterranean and the subcontinent, driven by the demand for light-skinned Greek women and Indian luxury goods. Greek slave women were known as Yavani in North India or Yavanar in South India. Slavers were varied and included state-sponsored merchants, pirates, and even Indian soldiers serving as mercenaries in the Persian military. But the trafficking of Greek slaves to the subcontinent increased significantly with the Roman takeover of Egypt, which opened up direct shipping lanes to India. Ownership of Greek slaves was an indication of elite status in the subcontinent. In fact, Indian elites demonstrated their power and prestige through possessing a multitude of women from distant and exotic lands. Thus, foreign slaves were a sort of currency. Based on the historical record, for example, we know that Western merchants would often buy access to local markets in India by gifting Greek women as slaves. Greek slave women played many roles in society. In both North and South India, Greek women served as barmaids, musicians, dancers, concubines, actresses, and even armed bodyguards. Kalidasa, the legendary Sanskrit poet, wrote that the most desirable race for female bodyguards was Greek, though he was referring to women from all over the Hellenistic world. It's worth noting that regardless of their profession, Greek women are described as wearing clothes that were typical of their homeland. Historians believe that this indicates there was prestige to be gained in associating with an exotic foreign culture. Light skin, light hair, Greek dress, and other indications of foreign origin were highly valued. Number 7. Scientific exchange between Greeks and Indians. Many Greek scientific texts were translated into Sanskrit during late antiquity and the classical period. In the astronomical realm, consider the 5 astronomical canons in India around the 5th century CE. Of these 5 texts, 2 were Greek, the Palisa Siddhanta and the Romaka Siddhanta. The Palisa Siddhanta represents the Alexandrian school of astronomy, while the Romaka Siddhanta represents learnings by the astronomers of Byzantine Rome. Indian scholars believed themselves much superior to Westerners, but recognized Western expertise in the sciences, including astronomy. In the Garga Samhita, it is written, "The Yavanas are barbarians, yet the science of astronomy originated with them, and for this they must be honored." In the Brihat Samhita, an ancient Indian scientist named Varaha writes, "The Greeks, though impure, must be honored, since they are trained in the sciences, and therein exceeded others." More generally, the centuries-long intellectual movement in Alexandria, a legendary center of learning that blended Hellenistic, Roman, and Oriental influences, led to the transmission of new ideas to India, from geography to mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine. The presence of Greek-speaking kingdoms in India enabled the translation of these texts to Sanskrit, and thus encouraged the rapid spread of foreign ideas and discoveries. Number 8. Western astrology meets Vedic astrology. Western Greek astrology has had a significant impact on Indian astrology. In fact, the zodiac signs were introduced to India by the Greeks. During the reign of the Western Kshatrapas, a Greek-speaking state that ruled over much of West India, a Greek astrological text was translated to Sanskrit and influenced the development of Indian Vedic astrology. This translated astrological text on horoscopy is known as the Yavana Jataka, or fortune-telling according to the Greeks, and was originally written around 120 CE in distant Alexandria, then ruled by the Roman Empire. It was translated from Greek to Sanskrit 30 years later by a man known as Yavaneshvara, or Lord of the Greeks, who served the Western Kshatrapas in Gujarat. This translation would become an authoritative text referenced by later astrological works in India. The Yavana Jataka makes allusions to Greek expertise in the context of horoscopy, all while honoring the work of native Indian sages who had their own procedures. Like other Indo-Greek powers, the Western Kshatrapas promoted translations from Greek to Sanskrit in an attempt to curry favor with powerful local hierarchies. This was an effective strategy, perhaps too effective. Towards the end of their long imperial history, the Western Kshatrapas had become so Indianized that even their coinage no longer contained real Greek words. Instead, their coinage contained pseudo-Greek letters meant only for visual stylization. That's a lot to consider. But it's fair to say that India and the Greco-Roman world was much more closely connected in ancient times than we've been led to believe. And now you know.